Good morning. Good morning, New Mexico. Good morning to all my extrovert therapists out there that help me get through each and every day by starting with me on Cafecito con Colon. Thank you for joining us.
Want to remember to record.
Good morning, New Mexico. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning, Dr. Lang. Good morning, Celestina Garcia. Good morning, Billy. Welcome back. Good morning, Jonathan Jones. Good morning, Ms. Olmsted. Thank you for joining me every day here on Cafecito con Colon. We've got Valencia County represented, Bernalillo County. Got Hidalgo in the house. Good morning, Shannon. Good morning, Donna. Great to see you this morning. That's exactly right, Billy. I knew that Harold would be rocking the three-piece suit today, so I had to bring a little game. All right. The truth of the matter is that today, tomorrow, and Friday, we're hosting our Governmental Finance Experts Conference with the Mexico Society of CPAs. So I'm lecturing today or presenting today, and so I had to make sure that I was suited up and ready to go for the hundreds of participants that are working in the Mexico Society of CPAs and the Office of the Doctor as we do the updates and talk about cybersecurity and things like that in the Office of the State Auditor as we work to protect New Mexico families by fighting waste, fraud, and abuse every day with the Office of the State Auditor in conjunction with the wonderful stakeholders at the New Mexico Society of CPAs. So that was just perfect because I knew it coincided with getting dressed up for Harold Pope Jr., somebody who's not just an incredible man who has dedicated his life to serving his community, wherever that community is, but also to making sure that he understands that his leadership matters. His capacity to inspire others happens in an exponential way because he looks a little different, because he is a little different, because he communicates with a part of our community that often looks up to leadership and does not see a reflection of themselves. And that's why I'm so grateful for Harold Pope Jr. stepping up and being a leader in our community. And as always, it is now 9:02 or 3, and I am going to put up a few links. Yesterday's show was absolutely mind-blowing, phenomenal. If you didn't get a chance to reach out and revisit some of the resources that the good doctor put up yesterday, Sonia Gibson Rankin, Sonia Maria, I will say, Gibson Rankin, phenomenal. You know, man, I can't even imagine her approach and the pedagogy she brings to the classroom at UNM School of Law, and she brought her A game yesterday, and I'm just grateful that I was able to share that hour with her. So if you did not get a chance to look at some of the resources, she was kind enough to invest another hour of her life in this platform after our show, and she put up resource links to many of the items she talked about during her presentation yesterday. Good morning, Fred Silva. Good morning, Pammy. But check out those resources and links that she helped share with us yesterday. So speaking of links, let me go ahead and get us started with a few links, and then we are going to do our best to get to Harold Pope Jr. Right at 10 or 11 minutes after the hour so that we can get the most out of our time with him. Good morning, Jose Valdez. Great to see you, Sunshine. So look, some great things going on in terms of the nation learning about what we've done during COVID-19's pandemic. The Rolling Stone covered Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, her perspective, her leadership, our approach in New Mexico as we fought back against the coronavirus, COVID-19, and making sure that we did flatten the curve in New Mexico and that we did take individual responsibility and enjoying today collective success and safety for our families. And while we have lost hundreds of New Mexicans, the impact of COVID-19 to the 9,000 people that have tested positive would have been far greater and far more painful had we not taken the measures we took as a state and under the leadership of Michelle Lujan Grisham and our Lieutenant Governor, Dr. Howie Morales. Speaking and staying on track with New Mexico news that I think it's important that you know, speak about leadership. And you know, Dr. Pope, I'll just give you the honorary doctorate from Cafecito con Colon. Harold Pope Jr., Harold, one of the things I've talked a lot about, and you tune in frequently, and I appreciate that, you validating my space by being a participant and a therapist for me. We've talked a lot about my desire to not have this be a flashpoint, but a tipping point. And as we're on day 16 or 15, depending on how you count the days after the murder of George Floyd, the link I'm about to post is an indication that this is different. And that while we've had protests over time, or whether it's in outrage over Aubrey, or whether it was anything over the last 6 years, right, since the Black Lives Matter movement has tried to shine a spotlight on the systemic and structural issues that plague our country, this is different, because now you have, within 2 weeks, you have legislators around the country who are putting in measures to try and change that systemic, those systemic concerns that we have that impact the Black community in such a negative way. Here in New Mexico, our Attorney General stood up tall yesterday and calling for yet putting just one more stakeholder, as I've come out publicly as it relates to our sheriff taking a stand on body cams here in Bernalillo County, and also chokehold bans. And so thank you, Attorney General Balderas, for standing tall, and thank you for the Albuquerque Journal for covering that. In a development that's important to this community and to me, we see the resignation of our director of New Mexico's Office of African American Affairs. I bring this up today because I find it an opportunity to say it once again, that this position should be elevated to a secretary level position. Under Governor Richardson, we elevated, I believe it was under Governor Richardson, we elevated the Indian Affairs Department to a secretary level agency, and we need to do the same for the Office of African American Affairs. We will not have Scott Carruthers there leading that office any longer, as he has submitted his resignation. I am optimistic and hopeful that our stakeholders will have a strong voice in who his successor will be. And I trust that the governor will engage those stakeholders. Thank you, Latanya. Thank you, Esteban. Good morning. Good morning, Selena. I appreciate you being here. Let me not miss the opportunity to give you a couple of links if you want to reflect on the funeral services. I streamed part of that yesterday, or most of it yesterday, on my Facebook page. So if you want to, there's lots of places to find it. But here is the AP story, which I thought was an awesome headline because it hits on what I talked about yesterday, which was George Floyd's murder, and George Floyd could change the world, but it's yet to be seen. He has captured our focus. He has shined a spotlight on the issue in a way that has never been done before, but it is now incumbent upon people like me to make sure that he does change the world, and that this is not a flashpoint, but a tipping point. And so the headline is, he is going to change the world. And that was a quote at his funeral services. Let me just also put up what I found to be powerful from the Houston Chronicle. But if you don't have time to tune into the funeral service, there are some very poignant and powerful photographs from that private funeral service that was held. Just a couple more resources, and then as promised, I'm going to make my 9/11 mark here. I wanted to post something from NPR that highlighted Code Switch's guide to race and policing. And I thought that that was an important resource for you today. And then I will end on a very high note, as I often do from my Optimist Daily, this incredible business owner who took his business and put his values before profit and turned his restaurant into a donation center. And so take a moment to review that when you can. So with that, let me, good morning, Dr. Mathewson, my former dean at the UNM School of Law. And thank you for validating my advocacy in elevating the director position to a cabinet level position. It is something I've said far before before Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham was sworn into office, and I have continued to sing that music more importantly on Cafecito con Colon for several weeks now. So thank you, Dr. Mathewson, for agreeing and advocating. Your voice has power, and your space is a space of high capacity. So thank you for standing with all of us in that. Good morning, Jim Buhag. I hope you're feeling 100% better. Thank you, Alfredo and Mr. Thompson, for joining us this morning. Jermaine, thank you for being a regular. Thank you for your advocacy in the social profit sector and your leadership and supporting us on our journey in this communication. So let me talk about Harold Pope Jr. It is exactly 9/11. Let me tell you that he is not just an incredible leader in our community. He has been on a journey of service for a lifetime, going straight into service right out of high school. He served in the United States Air Force. He went on, came back to UNM here after years of service and got his BS in biochemistry, you know, another one of those light degrees like my son, the biomedical engineer over there. He went the easy route and went for biochemistry and got his degree after doing some great work in service in the military. He's got 2 years of honorable service in our military, finished at Air Force Base, has made New Mexico his home. He loves the land of enchantment and has served us well in the time he's been here. I know that he and I have enjoyed a friendship that has enlightened me, has lifted me up, and he has been a true friend in, and we have been able to share some intimate moments of candor, and it has made me a better man. He has led nonprofit organizations. He's worked in the city of Albuquerque as a leader, where he brought that leadership experience and that very, very powerful lens that he looks through to the city of Albuquerque. He's the oldest child and is really had the lived experience of having to support and stand by his single mother as he was on that journey as a very young man. He's a problem solver, and what I appreciate most about Harold Pope Jr. is that he understands the power of accountability. He holds me accountable, but equally important, he holds himself accountable. I've talked on this show about the accountability partners that I have and the voices that inspire me and the voices who inform my positions, and Harold Pope Jr. is one of those voices. New Mexico is his home for the rest of his life, and I will just say briefly that he's got an incredible capacity to lead and a very unique lens that he looks through, and I am grateful to say that he has stepped up, and he now has the ability, after winning his primary election in a very, very handily way. I think he got 100% of the vote, so that was impressive. I've never gotten 100% of the vote for anything, but I will just say that I'm looking forward to his journey as he works to be the first Black and first African-American of any gender in our upper chamber, which is our New Mexico Senate, our body of 42, and bringing his voice to that conversation. And I appreciate him stepping up to do that. He is passionate about the west side of Albuquerque. He's passionate about his land of enchantment, his home. And I want to say thank you for stepping up. The only other announcement that I wanted to make that is important, and that we importantly bring the Black voice to, is we now have a vacancy on our Supreme Court that we will have to fill, as yesterday Justice Nakamura announced her retirement. I didn't want to fail to mention that and thank her for her service all the way from the Metro Court to our Supreme Court. And we're grateful for her service and leadership, and we look forward to the process to fill that vacancy. So with that, I just want to say thank you for your friendship. Thank you for agreeing to come on to Cafecito con Colon, and we appreciate you very much, Harold Pope Jr. Welcome to Triple C, where we speak truth to power here every single morning at 9 a.m.
Well, good morning, Brian, and thanks for having me. Appreciate it, the opportunity. Hope I can live up to the standard you put me on. You know, you've been promoting my appearance for a while, so I appreciate it. I also want to thank you for having all the different voices that you've had so far. You know, having Catherine McGill, Pamela Herndon, Patrick Barrett, Kenneth Scott, Devontae, Robert Gibson. It was great yesterday as well with Professor Gibson Rankin. So, like I said, I just want to have that discussion, and thanks for the opportunity.
Well, you bet. And I want to encourage our viewers that enjoyed Robert Gibson. You bring up Robert, and he had a streaming show yesterday that really made me laugh out loud and provide some comic relief for me in some conversations that I'll just encourage you to go to his page. He has friended me. Now you'll be able to find his Facebook page, but he really is a phenomenal guy who I'm really pleased to have had on Cafecito con Colon. So Harold, I guess where I'd like to begin is you've been on a journey that has been complicated and well informs you as a human, and well informs you and brings you to where you are today of looking at serving in public office. But I know that you understand that our focus on Cafecito con Colon is to provide Black voices, in particular, giving us an opportunity to grow as individuals and as participants to this show by telling us about your lived experience. And so I provided a little bit of your biographical data, but there is so much more. It's just like I tell my mentees that I helped get into law school over the last 20 years. I always tell them every application that gets submitted to UNM Law is exactly the same. It's this thick. And so if we can't communicate our story in a way that pops off that piece of paper, we maintain ourselves and our status in that big stack of applicants. And I think for you today, what I'm hoping you can do is help us really understand who Harold Pope Jr. is, and really provide some clarity in helping us understand the lens you look through on a daily basis. As a Black man who has a great presence, and help us really be better informed. Is that okay?
Sounds great.
Great.
Sounds like a plan.
It's all you.
Great. So my name is Harold Pope Jr. Thanks for the introduction again. My father actually lives here in Albuquerque. He's retired from UNM, so there's always a lot of confusion on people will say, well, Harold Pope, I know him, but no, I'm the son. So I just want to clarify that. Brian mentioned a little bit about my history. I'm the oldest of 5. I had my youngest brother passed away early with diabetic complications. But my family got divorced in middle school. My mother worked nights. So really, it was us as a family, us as siblings, we were really raising each other in a way. You know, we had food, the bills were paid. So that's really a lot of the lens that I look at, is when I'm in the community and I see other kids and the young men that I mentor, they're in a place that I was at. And for me to succeed and get out of that life and grow and become successful, I made the choice to join the military, join the Air Force, and I went away. And that motivated me to go to college. That motivated me to better myself. But I needed mentors. I needed people to help me, because where I was at in my community, I did not see people that looked like me successful. I did not see them in positions of leadership. I did not see them owning businesses. I didn't see that. So I had to go away to see that and say, wow, I can do that. I had to be motivated to do that. And unfortunately, it's sad that I had to do that. I don't think our youth and our community, people should not have to join the military or go away to get that. So that's why I really want to give props to Brian, because he's walking the walk. He mentors a lot of the youth in our community. I know he's even sent a few folks my way, and that's really what we need.
You know, I think let me just point out that and celebrate your engagement, because as you know, I mentor a lot of men of color, a lot of Black young men, and a few Black women, and I can only go so far, right? Because they can share their experience with me, and I can try and be supportive and try and open doors and use these 12,000 contacts in my iPhone for their benefit. But at the end of the day, I still don't have as much bandwidth as you have, even just giving them an hour of your time to help them better understand that their lived experience is something that you can relate to, because I can't, right? Because I'm part of the problem. And so I just want to say thank you for engaging with those young people that I do send your way on occasion. And you have always not only said, yes, I will take their call and I will meet them. You are a yes and kind of leader, and I appreciate that.
No problem. Thank you. So I think there's been a lot of the stories, and I think what I'm going to do today, Brian, is actually share something with you and the community that I've really never told anyone outside my family.
Oh.
So my background, my father's African American, and when I use these terms, African American and Black, they're really the same. So just in case there's no confusion as we further this discussion, my mother is half Black, but my grandmother on her side is Mexican American and Navajo. So my grandmother was born and raised in northern New Mexico. So that's really on that side of the family where my roots are from. When my grandmother married my grandfather, who was African American on my mother's side, the family, her parents accepted it, but her brothers and sisters did not. So growing up, we did not know that side of the family. And I'm not going to give the family name or anything, but to impugn them or anything, but we just never knew that side of the family. And we would go to school and we'd find out later on during the years that people were related to them, but we had no idea. So I bring that up to say that that's something when we talk about racism, that this is something that I saw early on in my family. And it was something that was an issue. And I'd also like to say I'm bringing it up because people look at me and they think, well, what is he? Is he mixed? You know, and I just like to say, as African Americans, as Black Americans, we're all a little different. We're still Black, but people assume things or don't know who you are. And because of the way I look, that has also allowed me to hear things and see things because people did not know that I was Black in some instances. And it's been eye-opening growing up, hearing these things. For example, I was stationed in Florida, and some people would think I was Puerto Rican. I was in the Middle East with my haircut.
Well, that's quite a compliment, right? Like there's not too many of us that can claim Boricua status.
Yeah. Well, in that instance, they were offended that my Spanish wasn't that good, so they were upset.
I offend people for the same reason. Don't worry.
Yeah.
But and if you take a look back at the history of Puerto Rico, it's actually not that far off. I mean,
no.
Right? We know that Puerto Ricans over time have become more fair, but we know that wasn't always the case. And so,
exactly.
And especially the natives, the Tayanos, they were Black.
Yeah.
And my dad was quite dark, actually, and actually had your complexion when I think about it.
Yeah. So I say that because having features of being mixed, right? I hear those conversations from all angles because people assume what I am, and they sometimes feel safe to say things and will say racist things, or you will hear, like you mentioned yesterday, the microaggressions or the comments, right? So it's really given me a lens in a lot of ways to where it's not just where some people just get the black and white. You get a sense of everything. So because I'm mixed, right, I will even get comments from people that will talk about Hispanic people and not understand that that's part of my background as well. Mm-hmm. And I would have to correct them, especially and sometimes that would happen in the military. So.
Well, I think and I'm sorry for my part in any of that in terms of the collective my part, I guess I should say. But I will say that during this important time, it actually enhances your ability to help us be better because you can share those insights, right?
Yeah.
So yes. I appreciate it. It's complicated, and thank you for feeling comfortable to share that with us. this morning, and to know that I hold a special place in my heart for you, and you know, we've endeared ourselves to each other in a special way, I think, over the last couple of years. And but thank you for feeling safe to
Yeah.
allow our viewers.
And one of the reasons I bring that up is my family, some of the family members, my aunts, we actually are doing like the ancestry.com and stuff. And we've actually been tracking down some of these folks, you know, and I think we've traced some ancestry all the way back to, like, on my grandmother's side, to Spain, like in 1400. So it's kind
I love that.
of wild, kind of interesting.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that. Well, I want to kind of get some of your thoughts, and we've talked offline about this, but you know, I've always tried to engage our guests in sharing their personal experience and their lived experience, and I guess what I want to ask you, Harold, is pretty sensitive, but I think that if you can share with us, I think it helps us understand kind of what so many people of color who decide to step up at a higher rate, I will say, than others, who step up and say, yes, I'm willing to serve. And I've said it before on Cafecito, I've always had a desire to serve, but didn't have the courage to serve in our military, like people like you and people like Alex Flores and Brion Paez, and so many men in my life that are spectacular and phenomenal leaders. And even my mom, who stepped up and served in the Navy at a time when women didn't serve, generally speaking. And she had what I will say is a very, I think I'm, you know, she had a very negative experience in that service. And I didn't have that courage, and you did. And so I know your experience was your experience. And so I guess I'm asking for you to maybe enlighten those of us that are tuned in this morning. We've got about 6 people now, and by the end of the day, we'll have over 1,000 to 1,500 views. So maybe share with us so that we can help better understand your lived experience.
Great. So with my military experience, I would say for the most part, it was good. And I think that experience not only helped me, but other people joining. I was served with members when I first joined basic training. There were folks that were from the Deep South, Confederate flag waving, everyone's a Yankee, and whites hang with whites. I mean, they came in with those views. I would say after basic training, that changed a little bit. So I think that experience actually shaped people, and it forced people to work together regardless of race or religion. But it is still an institution with problems. We just had the nomination was approved for the first African-American chief of staff for all the services. He's actually one of my fraternity brothers. He's a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. So he's the new chief of staff. But that doesn't change what's going on in the Air Force. There still is African-American officers are still not getting promoted at the higher ranks. And I think that goes back to when we look at just the institutions around the United States. These institutions were not built for us. These are institutions that they're integrating to put us in. And I think whenever
that was a great point last night. I streamed, and I think you might have tuned in for a bit.
Yeah.
I streamed Oprah Winfrey's dialogue engagement, and they talked about that. These institutions were built to do exactly what they're doing right now. So I just want to highlight what you just said, because I think that was a moment for me last night. I think it was a really poignant way to put it. When we talk about these institutions and we talk about structural and institutional racism that others can't wrap their head around, when we look back at the historical context, saying that these structures and these institutions were built to do exactly what they're doing today is heavy. And in the military, it's no different. And so I appreciate you just saying that. I want to just emphasize it.
Yeah. And we could look at, like I said, these other institutions, school systems. I mean, that's why we have these problems. So I would see this, and you can change laws. You can say, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to give these opportunities. But the institutions are still structured in a way to where there's still discrimination. And if you still have the same leadership to where they're still promoting within. And that's where I think you see some of the racism, in the sense that, and people will look out and take care of people that look like them. So if you don't have that many senior leaders that are African American or Black officers, it's less likely for you to succeed and hit those higher ranks and get promoted. So that's really the big issue. And what I don't like is, now that we have someone who has reached the pinnacle, we can't just say, oh, there's no issues, there's no problems, because there is. It's the same as folks said, President Obama's in the White House, racism is gone. No, it's not. It just means that these people, these individuals, overcame that. That's what it means.
I think that's right. And the fact that we have to celebrate it should emphasize the idea that it's the exception. I look forward to the day when we, and it won't be for generations, but it's no longer the exception, it's accepted. And there's really a difference there, right? Like,
yes.
Why is it that we can name, our first two Native American congresswomen? Why? Because they're so exceptional. It's the exception. They're the first. And so I look forward to a couple generations from now when that not just being the exception, but it is accepted and commonplace. And that's going to take generations. I don't say generations lightly, but that will take generations. And you're part of that, Harold. And I appreciate you stepping up in the military. And I appreciate you stepping up to be part of New Mexico's public policy landscape as a candidate for the upper chamber. And I have been careful. I've had candidates on, like Court of Appeals Judge Shamara Henderson, who is amazing, first African-American on our Court of Appeals. So this is not a campaign show for Harold Pope, but I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to tell you how grateful I am that you're running.
Thank you. So I'd like to talk about a story. Actually, I can tell you a couple of stories from the military. One, when I was at UNM before I got commissioned as an officer, I remember going in, and this goes to the bias and the microaggression, kind of like a statement that I got before I went back in. Right. I was a recruiting officer for Air Force ROTC at UNM, and I went talking to one of my leaders. I'll just keep it like that. And basically, he was like, "We really need to get more African American recruits in the program and minorities." And my reply back to him was, "Yes, I agree. I'm trying to, but I said a lot of the people I know are engineers or in the STEM field, and they're getting a lot of scholarships and opportunities with the labs and some of these other companies and Intel, and they're not really interested in joining the military at this time." And I remember to this day, the comment he told me was, "Well, if they're smoking marijuana, they can still come in, we can waive that." And first I was kind of stunned, and then I basically responded back and I said, "This isn't about drugs or anything like that. That's not why they don't want to join."
Right.
And from that point, he kind of backed up. But those are the kind of things that it's like, why is that even popping in your head?
That's a great example. Right on track with the doctor's example yesterday. Yeah. About, is there a father? Is there a father? I think it was that bull.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, these will just make your head explode when you hear them on the outside. Yeah. But I think what she said yesterday was so powerful. It's on me to get better educated. It's not on you to point out those microaggressions to me. If you can, please do. But really, if I'm more educated, I will do better, and I will do better. And I just want to highlight that point from yesterday, because you gave just a good example.
Yeah, but I think I also wanted to mention it puts people also in a tough position. This was someone that had controlled me going back in the Air Force, right? So sometimes you're making a decision of, do you speak up or do you just remain quiet, right? And these are things that face me in my career later on, because this would continue. And I'm going to be honest with you, I think because I pushed back and I didn't let things just, or sweep them under the rug, it actually hurt my career. I'm going to be honest with you, like as far as promotion. But I go to bed with a clear conscience. I don't, because I know I did the right thing. And I think people have to make that decision. It's not just in the military, it's in their jobs. It's making decisions with things that are made about their family. And for me, that was an easy decision when you think about it, because I still had a job. Think about the people every day that just go to work that could just get fired for no cause if they speak up. So those are the people that we really need to worry about. Another story, I had two friends. We were the same rank in the military, young officers, and one of them made a comment in our workspace. He basically said, "Why is there Black History Month? How come we don't have a White History Month?" Right. So one of my other peers was like, "Oh, you better not say anything about that. You're going to get in trouble." And I go, "Okay." So I had a conversation with the guy, and we actually talked about why there is Black History Month and differences and what's going on. And he was actually open to the conversation. And after the conversation, he was like, "Oh, okay, I get it." 10 years later, we're still friends. We still communicate on Facebook. So the friend who made the comment about why isn't there White History Month, he's actually in a master's program at USC. And in that program, that teaching program, there's like, he had a mandatory take 2 courses on diversity and inclusion. And after the class, he called me up and he goes, "You know what? I just want to apologize to you. I never recognized my white privilege." You know? So people are open, yeah,
That's
and
powerful,
people
right?
can change. Whereas I'm going to tell you, the person who actually brought up "don't say that they get their Black history," he wasn't really, even though he made that comment and made it, and it looked like he was standing up to that issue, he really wasn't. He still didn't believe in it, but he just was a guy that just did not want to address it. And it was just like, well, they have their Black history, even though he didn't like it. And he still has not been open. Yeah.
Yeah, let's just applaud his actions representing what was suggested again yesterday by the professor Gibson Rankin, which was, we have to essentially take inventory, and then we have to take responsibility. We have to get educated, take inventory, and then take responsibility. And I think, I applaud him for actually circling back on that inventory and owning it and taking responsibility, because if we don't take responsibility, the education doesn't stick, right? Like if it's not a pain point to go back and say, look, I have learned, I have received this training, whether it's by Dr. Jennifer Gomez Chavez and the cultural competency lessons that she provides, or wherever you get that knowledge, or some of the books that we talked about yesterday and the day before. We have to go back and own our stuff, because we're the ones that are broken. We are the ones that are the problem. And I just think we have to be clear on that.
Yes, agreed.
So tell me, the other thing that we've talked a lot about, I think in the last few days, for me, it's wanting to ensure that we don't lose this moment, that we don't just provide outrage and participation and in rallies and protests and vigils like I'm doing down in Valencia County Saturday night. And you're welcome to join me. I posted that on my Facebook wall. How do we make sure this is not just a flashpoint, that in fact it is a tipping point? And I know that we've seen some things structurally that indicate that this won't be a flashpoint. But Harold, at least from your perspective, what do we need to be thinking about, and how can we be good allies, and how do we ensure that we don't just talk about it, but that we actually act upon this moment?
So for me, it's just holding our leaders accountable, and you don't have to be in a position of leadership to do that. I see some movement going on here, even in the state. We have to make sure that it's not just a check mark or a press conference or some board or some council. Like, I want to see something with some teeth, that we're going to actually do something. And we're going to include the African-American community as a whole. It can't just be the same leaders that we go to, and they're doing a great job. And that's not to criticize our current leaders that we have that have done great, but we can't just keep going to the same people. I want people that don't have titles. We need to be inclusive in that. We need to involve, also, we need buy-in from our allies, from the rest of the community, because there is going to be some pushback. I think this is a moment where we can change, but you would be naive to think that people are not going to push back on this. Okay. I mean, I think it's a great moment. We even see the corporate world jumping on this, right?
Right.
But believe me, there is going to be serious pushback on any type of legislation or action that we do. So that means we as a community as a whole, we all have to be on board to also show our leaders that this needs to be done, because they're not going to act unless we pressure them to do it.
Well, I think that's right. Creating and identifying those pressure points in our leadership structures is really the way we do the change, and that we hold folks accountable, whether it's Bank of America, my goodness, stepping up in such a substantial way with $1 billion, that's with a B, folks, $1 billion commitment in 4 years worth of resources to address systemic racism and to provide support for those organizations that are deconstructing the systems that were, I say, broken, but I don't think I'll ever say that again, because last night, listening in the presentation, that said, it was a professor, I think she said it, and she said, system's not broken. It's doing exactly what it was created to do. And man, I think it was probably the most powerful, and there were some powerful presenters last night. And if you didn't see that, I streamed it as a watch on I'll try and find the link. I'm sure it's online somewhere, but I hosted a watch last night. But the system's not broken. It's doing exactly what it was created to do. And so holding us accountable, and I say us as in somebody who holds a title and occupies a political space, but also holding the Bank of America's accountable to follow through on that beautiful commitment that they made of $1 billion, or Comcast for, I think they committed $100 million. Corporate America is stepping up, but that can't just be the press release and the check writing. It has to be changes in our actions and in their actions. Right, Harold?
Yes. And it can't just be focused only on police reform. We really have to talk about how we're going to address systematic racism and institutional racism. This can't be just from a state level, even the federal level, where, okay, we pass a few laws, we ban chokeholds, and then we move on and we're done. This is a bigger issue. What happened here was really the symptom, the overall symptom of what we're dealing with. And it's really racism that we've never really addressed. There's never been a reconciliation of that issue in this country. And we need to address it. Part of it is these discussions, and some don't want to talk about it. I understand it's uncomfortable, but I would say to the folks that don't want to talk about it, imagine the African Americans and the people of color that deal with it every day, that have to live with this. And I think people that are online that are Black and African American, they probably agree with me. In a way, we're forced to kind of live in two worlds. We go to our jobs, we go to our work, and sometimes we are the only person that looks like us there. And a lot of times we are almost to simulate and act a certain way. We're almost looked at as we represent the whole community, with our opinions, our voice. We deal with trauma with what happened with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. There's always a new victim every month or every few weeks. And we have to just go to work and act like everything's fine, because in a lot of cases, people don't want to talk about these issues. And then we come home and then we're able to vent and talk about these issues. But sometimes some of us don't have those people to have those discussions. So think about all that trauma, all that stress. And, now you see why folks are in the streets.
Right.
They're protesting, but whether you don't have to agree with the damage to property and things like that, but you have to understand the anger. And if you feel that and you feel like there's nothing you can do, these things happen.
No, I think that's right. People have talked about being exhausted. Thankfully, a few people have unfriended me because of this space that I've created on my personal page. And which is awesome because I've got about 1,200 people who have submitted friend requests that I can't accept because I was at the 5,000 maximum. And as you know, Harold, the political page on Facebook isn't as interactive as the personal page.
Yeah.
So I haven't been able to migrate and use that page more. So I'm really a personal page Facebook user. And so, and they're unfriending, it's too much. Well, how much more so for people of color with the lived experience, whether you want to self-identify as African American or Black. And I will tell you that for the last 20 years, I've always referenced as African American men and women of color, and it's only this last 15 days where I have felt comfortable. Let me say it differently. The last few months, I guess I would say, contemplating whether it's appropriate for me to use the term Black. And I still struggle. And I think Jonathan Muniz put it in the comments that, that's a good question. And it's a personal preference. And it's if we see any micro movements, right? We all can sense micro movements. And if I use the wrong term, I am always trying to make sure that I'm hypersensitive to those micro movements and then adjust accordingly. But I think at this moment in time, for me, it's more powerful in my own advocacy to use the reference and term Black men and Black women, and providing a space for Black voices, because I think it is congruent with Black Lives Matter and that conversation. And for me to be able to create a space where that's comfortable, I think it supports the dialogue that's going on that is being led by BLM.
Great. Well, Brian, I just want to applaud you for taking this stand and giving us a voice on your platform. This is not a winning political issue. And I know you're not about that, especially here in New Mexico. And you're right, it's easy for folks to say 2.9%, whatever, you know what I mean? So I appreciate what you're doing. And I know that you're losing some followers over that, but you're doing it because it's the right thing to do. So I appreciate that. And it's the same for me.
But I can't do it alone. I can't do it alone.
Right.
So thank you.
You're right.
Thank you for saying yes and, right? Yeah. Like when I reached out, you said yes, and I'll be there whatever day you give me. Yeah. And so, you said yes. So I want to say thank you for that.
So it's the same with me as well, right? I'm running for office. And there's no way that I could separate what is going on, because this is my life. I can't turn that off. I'm an African American man and I deal with these issues. Now, is it, when I announced, was it my number one issue? No, but I'm not going to run from it. And if people choose to not support me because it is something that I'm going to fight for, it is what it is. I can't separate from that. And I just think we need more people with courage to just say, we're going to do the right thing. We're not going to do things on what are the polls, or we're going to lose these votes, or the other party is going to attack me if I bring this up. So once again, I applaud you for doing that. And we just have to do the right thing and have these discussions. Over time, even the naysayers, they're going to come on board, whether it's begrudgingly, where they're like, okay, I'm on board now, but eventually they're going to have to be on the right side of history, because that's where we're going.
Right. And hopefully this is the chapter where we write history in a way that we can be proud of, instead of the country's 400 years of history and New Mexico's history that goes back even further. And so help me be better, hold me accountable, because if I'm not on that right side, you need to knock me over to the right side and help me be a better human being. And I appreciate us being able to be accountability partners for one another, for you seeking my counsel over the years. That's a, if I may, a badge of honor, because I respect you so much and appreciate your friendship so much. And I'm just grateful at this time that we have New Mexicans like you that are willing to come to a place that you're willing to have a difficult dialogue that may not be comfortable. And for you, you are some might say a stoic man who isn't often to smile. And there you go. There's that smile. You know, I picked out those pictures, and I worked to make sure that people could see that $1 million smile you get when you're happy, and I just appreciate you. I appreciate you so much, and maybe we can, as we come up to the top of the hour in the next few minutes, maybe you can share a little bit about how have you actually processed, right? Like, I know that you and I joked, and people joke about us all the time, and the three-piece suit and all that stuff. And then this morning when you came on, you said it was the first time you'd put on the three-piece in quite some time. And thank you for doing that, because you would have disappointed those that tuned in for your high fashion. And I'm glad I could be wearing my Xenia tie and my black suit in your honor. But can you talk to us a little bit about how have you, because we heard last night about exhaustion, right? And if you think you as a white person of privilege are tired of this conversation on Cafecito con Colon, how much more exhausting is it for a woman of color or a man of color or a black woman, a black man, to have had a lived experience where they don't have the luxury of being able to get exhausted. They have to keep pushing the next day, regardless of the microaggressions that they suffered the day before. They still have to find the way to put both feet on the floor and fall forward. And so what does it look like for Harold Pope over the last 16 days or 15 days since you saw the video of the killing of George Floyd, and maybe even a little further back if you want to get into some of the other atrocities that have taken place? How do you process? How do
yeah, it's tough, especially when you're dealing with COVID-19. So I've been staying away, and I've been unable to even see my mother because she's got some health issues, right? So it's really been leaning on friends here talking, and I've attended a couple of the protests. I've attended some of the rallies at Civic Plaza, the event that Michael Silva put on in Charles Ashley, and really just having a discussion on what we're going to do. I will say that this is different in the sense that before it was just posting on Facebook or saying, wow, is this ever going to change? Now I see a lot of us coming together in the community, even more members of the African American community, that we're all in different areas, different fields, that yes, we respected each other and supported each other, but we're all, I think, getting together to say, we have to do something, and we have to hold our friends that are not people of color. And what are you going to do? This is not just an African American issue. It's an American issue. It impacts us all. And I think that's been the discussion now. And I think what you're dealing with on your Facebook, I'm very happy to see is what's been happening with a lot of my friends. A lot of my friends that have stayed silent or even quiet on the issue, they care, but they're like, I don't get into politics. I'm like, this isn't politics. This is life.
Right.
I think they're waking up now saying, you know what? There's people that I don't need to associate with these people, or I can't believe these people are doing this, and I need to be a better person. That they realize they have the power to change this. It can't be just African Americans that are going to make the change. It's not. It doesn't work that way, and it's impossible. It's not going to happen. We are not in those positions of power. We don't own the corporations. We don't own the businesses. We aren't leaders in the government. It's not going to happen. So that's how I processed it. Like I said, giving you credit, I love what you're doing. Some people don't like it. I remember earlier on, there were a lot of comments when you were doing your first few videos. You know, there was the all lives matter and everybody's, you know, doing all that. But thank you for staying strong in this and saying, look, we have to have this discussion. So that's how I processed it, is how are we going to do this? And even, and I'll be frank with you right now, I even have to hold the people in my party accountable as well, because there's always this talk, right? There's always like, we're about diversity and inclusion, but what are we really doing? What are we doing to support other people to run for office? Are you mentoring them? Are we really doing that? Or are we just providing lip service? So that's
that's a strong point. That's a strong point. And I want to, thank Esteban. There's so many great comments. There's just no way for me to highlight them all, Harold. And you're beeping like crazy over there because everybody's tagging you. But I would just say that I started yesterday, and I'm sure they were out there before, so I don't want to understate the engagement in the conversation. But I started seeing yesterday a little more prevalently on my social media feed, essentially people of color, Hispanics, and I'm in a lot of Hispanic leadership organizations, whether it's NALEO, the National Association of Latino Elected Officials, or the Mexico Hispanic Bar Association, or any number of organizations that I engage with that are advocates for giving people a voice, particularly from the Hispanic community. But I heard a lot more in the last 48 hours about your struggle being our struggle, and that we have to stand with you. And Esteban pointed out, and in some ways it was mimicking behavior where we have had migrant field workers that have essentially been owned by those folks that are running the agriculture sector. And the correlation is not that hard to draw. And so any one of us who are Hispanic, who are not willing to stand with this movement instead of a moment, we are doing not just our society a disservice generally, but our own community, if we can say that, or if I can say that, our own community a disservice in advancing our desire to have equal space in those rooms, whether it be the boardrooms or the rooms of public policy that you are going to be a part of for a very long time, Harold. And so I appreciate what you said, and it resonated with me in terms of organizations like NALEO, who are stepping up and saying, your fight is our fight, and we are going to stand with you. And being according to you, who understood what it meant to have such a representation of upstanders from the Jewish community stand with the civil rights movement very early on, as you know, Harold, and
Yes.
you supported my work with the Holocaust and Intolerance Museum, and you've been an upstander, and that part of my story is an important one to me. And so, I don't know, I guess I just say it's an honor to stand beside you and behind you during this journey. But I certainly don't ever want to feel like I'm getting in front of you on this journey.
No, not at all. And I appreciate the support.
Tell me, is there anything, I talk a lot during Cafecitos. Is there anything, I know that you are a man of few powerful words. I've seen your speeches. I have been with you in conversations where you sit back, you take it all in, you process it, and then you come out with your profound and succinct statements, and I should learn from that. But today, was there, in thinking about getting ready for today, like for me, I really wanted to get your perspective as someone who has served our country with distinction in the military. I wanted that voice to be heard, and I appreciate you being candid with us on that. Is there anything that you thought about maybe sharing with the Cafecito crowd that I didn't give you a chance to, or give you enough space to? Because I certainly want to be able to do that.
No, we're fine. So is this probably the end? I just want to make sure.
It's only the end when you say it's the end, sir.
Okay.
You're in charge.
So I guess a comment I would make is, and I think I've seen this on a meme, and I'll make sure to smile right now, get some practice in for you. There's always this argument that African Americans or other minorities want special rights or want more. And that's not the case. We're just wanting the same and the opportunities as our white counterparts. We're not fighting for one set pie, and for us to get equality is going to take from you. And it benefits us all. It benefits us all as a nation. So you might, I didn't know if you were going to ask this later, but I would just say the question is always like, what can we do, right? How do we support African Americans? So to me, it's basic. It's just love us. When I say love us, I'm saying love African Americans like you love our culture, like you love our food, like you love our music, you love our artists, you love our actors and actresses, you love our slang, our style. And you see this so many times to where in American popular culture, the things that we do become American culture. And some people will take this at the same time, not like the people. So I think that's a huge start, is loving African Americans like you love the culture. If we just had that, I mean, that's a big step there.
Huge. Don't let me cut you off, because I think that's profound. I think it's profound, Harold.
Yeah.
And that's all. Thank you. And I think we do love your culture, and you lead, change when it comes to culture, in so many ways starts with the Black community, the African American community. And so many of us feel a deep connection to that community because of the historical context of our own, whether it be families who are mixed race, or whether they be who come from Puerto Rico. We feel you, if that's okay to say.
Yeah.
And we need to not just feel you. We need to not just embrace that culture. We need to not just love that culture. We need to love you. And Harold Pope Jr., I love you. I love you for the friendship you've given me so generously. I love you for the example you set for our young men and women of color to be able to look to you and see a reflection of themselves. And I'm grateful for that. Thank you for joining me on Cafecito con Colón.
Thank you.
So ladies and gentlemen, I think that's going to wrap it up for today's session. Today at 12:02, we will conclude the extrovert therapy for Brian Colon. So thank you for being my therapist. And Harold, thank you for being my friend. Thank you for being a distinguished veteran. Thank you for stepping up to serve for the New Mexico Senate, our upper chamber. I have posted links to your webpage and your donation page. I think Treasurer Burse suggested if everybody gives 10 or 20 bucks, you could raise $1,000 in the next 20 minutes. So we'd like that, and I'd support that. And that's the biggest political plug I've given in 76 days or so, and I'm proud to have done it. Look, tomorrow we're going to have a great day with Charles Ashley III, another young man who's inspired me on my journey. And then on Friday, we will have Marcus Porter, and maybe Denise Lee is going to join us as well on Friday. And then on Saturday, I don't remember who we have coming in, but I will tell you that it will be another Black Voice, and it will take us to probably 12 days of Black Voices. Yes, you are welcome. There are about 1,200 people who would like me to accept their friend request, and I'm happy to step out of the way. You don't like to be separated here. I can't grow every day. And as long as I'm going to bring these folks on, and I'm grateful for their agreeing to do that. Not just saying yes, but yes, and I will bring that voice on any day you give me. And thank you, Harold Pope, for being a yes and kind of leader. And I will look forward to seeing you soon on my personal journey. Thank you. Join us again tomorrow on Cafecito con Colón, and make it a beautiful day. Reach out to 3 folks who may be in isolation and remind them they're not alone. Send them Harold Pope's love, send them Brian Colon's love, and let them know that we're thinking of them, and we're going to get on the other side and fall forward. Make it a beautiful day, New Mexico. I love all of you. God bless. Bye-bye. Bye, Harold.